Hello and welcome, everyone. Glad to see you here. Now, I like to start things with a song, so we're going to start singing. We're so glad you came to join us tonight as we talk about what's going on with admissions, applications this year. I'm going to try my best on the law school test. I'm going to try till I can't try no more. Try my best on the law school test. I'm going to try until I earn my score. LSAT is the test. Give it full court press. Can't do nothing less. Gotta give my very best. Working in my course. Kaplan is the source. Powerful like horse. Test just can't resist my force. Can't nobody trick me nothing. Can't nobody trick me, nobody trick me nothing. Can't nobody trick. I'm gonna try my best on the law school test. I'm gonna try till I can't try no more. Try my best on the law school test. I'm gonna try until I earn my score. Hi, I'm Teacher Jed. I'm so glad to have you here. But I'm not the only great teacher here. No, we have Teacher Stuart and Joe talking to you in the chats. Please ask lots of questions in the chats because we got experts here to talk to you and help you with all the things. And Stuart and Joe, they know all the, they're full-blown LSAT teachers just like me. They know the stuff. They know the stuff. They'll make sure you know what's going on. But they're not the only experts either. Oh no. I went and I recruited us some good ones. So talk to us a lot in the chat, but I want to introduce our distinguished guests and experts. Two of our top admissions experts here joining me tonight, Barb Noble and Jesse Borges. Please, would you come on? Yes, here they are, my friends.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for coming. So please, each of you, Barb, would you go first? Introduce yourself and your experience so folks know who you are, and then we'll get into the meat of tonight's discussion.
Sure, and I apologize that it's not in song form. I have been with Kaplan for about 16 years now. Before that, I kind of met Kaplan through my time at Brandeis, where I was an assistant director of career services, working primarily with grad school and law school, and decided to kind of become a mom. And this was the absolute perfect way to continue working with law students. I've worked with, I don't even know how many at this point, primarily in the US, but also Canadian law schools. And I have a BA and an MA from Michigan State. It was political theory, and then I went into higher ed administration. So I think it's funny that I started thinking I wanted to be a lawyer, and now I help people become lawyers.
Hey, I know that story. That was my story too. Jesse.
Yes, well, I've joined Kaplan also a long time ago. Back in 1997, I became senior grad school consultant in 98. I'll be starting my 25th year with Kaplan actually this year. I have a Ph.D. from Princeton in political science. I've been a consultant to a number of institutions, including University of Chicago, Columbia Business School, and over the years, I've advised about 3,000 applicants on their applications.
See, I told you I got the experts. So we only have an hour. We got a lot of ground to cover. Based on the polls, it looks like more of you are actually thinking about applying for fall 2022 than fall 2021. We'll talk about both cycles, of course, but we're going to try to balance our time knowing that most of you are thinking ahead rather than behind in the process. But let's just start with a high-level overview. Barb, would you start by describing the major pieces of an application to law school that folks need to get?
Sure. So I think I kind of look at it as there's pieces that you control, and there's pieces that once they're done, you get to walk away from. The LSAT, that's Jed. Your GPA matters. It's, you know, if you're still in school, it matters, and senior year matters. So don't think, oh, I'm almost done. In general, we look at, you know, you need to start your list, where you want to go. You need a personal statement. You need a resume. You need letters of rec. And depending on if you're traditional or not traditional, it might be all professors, it might be employers. And Jesse, you're nodding. I know what addendums, if you've had some kind of need to explain a couple of things.
That sounds like a lot of stuff.
It's a lot. So what I like to tell people is it's a little overwhelming, but break it down. That's what we're here to help with. We break it down and it becomes manageable.
Well, and Jesse, would you help us prioritize those things? Which is tier one? Where's tier two?
Well, with applying to law school, tier one and two, I would say is LSAT and GPA from way back before I was even advising on law school applications or writing letters for my students applying to law school. Those two, I look at those two as being the two most important pieces of the application that will get you in the ballpark. And then I look at everything else as what's most likely to help push you over. Now, I have had applicants, Barb has as well. We've had applicants come in who've been rejected the prior year, and all we did was advise them maybe on a new personal statement and a few other pieces of the application, and they got in. But for most folks, LSAT and GPA is going to be a critical piece. And those cases, in some of those cases where they got in just by changing some of the written parts of the application, they really weren't very good. They might have been bad, actually, to begin with. And so they stood out and really dragged the application down. They got into the game maybe based on LSAT and GPA, and then they, were off the field because of a penalty because they just did so poorly on the rest of the application. But LSAT and GPA really at the top. But then there's so many applicants in the middle. We've had admissions officers tell us, we get these applications and in a lot of cases we could flip a coin because so many applicants are close, especially when we come down to the last 50, 100 or so students, and we could go many different ways. And so that's why, and that's where a good personal statement, diversity essay, addendum, great recommendations, they can really help get you in.
Great. And I want to make sure that I emphasize this as an LSAT teacher, right? That GPA we're a little stuck with, and we'll talk just a moment more about this. But LSAT score is an opportunity, right? You can't change your GPA in a couple months. You can totally change your LSAT score in a couple months. And based on the polls, I see that a lot of you haven't even taken a practice test yet. That's one of the first things you need to do, right? Is figure out where you're starting from. But we call it the diagnostic because it says where you are. We don't call it the destiny test. Because as long as you're willing to work hard in the right ways, we can make that score look like whatever you need it to. And then, with the good help of folks like Barb and Jesse, right, we can get you the essays written that you need and all those other things. But Barb, speaking about GPA, when we talk about the application, we're really talking about the undergraduate GPA, right? Less so the graduate GPA. Would you talk about that difference and how a graduate degree might affect someone's application?
Sure. They're definitely looking at the undergrad, and most applicants that I have worked with are applying with just the undergrad. A couple have gone on, and maybe this might be the third degree, but they're looking at the undergrad, and they're going to look at the grad. It's a piece, and they're going to look at it. Jesse, what have you found with that?
Undergrad tends to be by far the most important because that's going to go into the LSAT GPA calculation. But there have been cases where applicants, they come to me and they say, look, I really didn't do well in undergrad. My GPA is not great, but I got a master's degree in XYZ, whatever the field is, and I did really well there. And they'll say, so is this going to be taken into account when they calculate GPA and LSAT and do a numerical calculation called the law school index score? And each school has its own index score, and applicants shouldn't worry too much about it. But the answer is no, the graduate school grades won't be calculated as part of that law school index. So that's, of course, that's a downer for applicants who have a graduate degree and are applying. But at the same time, they've done well in grad school. In many cases, that proves that, hey, maybe the undergraduate GPA in this case wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And this applicant is really better than that as depicted by the LSAT score and by the graduate GPA. So graduate school can definitely help, but undergrad GPA is really, really important because that's the number that's calculated with the LSAT when they initially sort of begin to think about where a student fits in the entering class.
Sure. And we have a lot of great questions coming in, y'all. We'll address as many as we possibly can. I want to emphasize, though, that the specific advice always trumps the general. We're mostly going to be speaking in generalities here. If you want to book some time to talk with Jesse one-to-one about your situation, we can make that happen. But in general, that undergraduate GPA is what they're looking at, and that is an important number. In general, if you're going to be what we call a splitter, low one, high the other, it's better to have the high LSAT score.
Yes.
Right. Again, this is an opportunity because the LSAT is something you have control over, right? And you can change in a lot less time than say your undergraduate GPA, which for most of us is pretty well set. We have a couple of non-traditional folks here too. Barb, in your experience, is the work experience and other things an important part of those folks' applications? And will that undergraduate GPA as much matter if somebody's coming back after a few years?
Yeah, I think that it's a question of how much time. So if we're talking 4 years versus 20 years. And so it's certainly definitely, it's kind of like Jesse said. So you have these two numbers and then a lot of extra stuff. And so experience in any way is going to be helpful, whether it's an internship, whether it's 5 years. And then it's how you explain it. It's how you say to the admissions person, this is why this is useful. And so it is going to make a difference. I think it's going to make a difference also when it comes to letters of rec. It's really hard after 10 years out of school to try to find a professor who remembers you. So I think that is another piece where, but a really strong letter from an employer is just as useful as a professor's recommendation.
And let's actually continue to talk about that because we have a lot of questions coming in about letters of rec. Who should someone pick as their recommender, y'all?
Well, and I get this question all the time, and also I'll go through a series of questions back at the applicant, and I'll say, well, who would write you the best letters, first of all, because I want to know what the best quality is going to be, and then we'll sort them. So which are faculty, which are volunteer supervisors, which are employers, which are coaches or musical directors if you're performing in a singing group or an orchestra or something. And then so we'll sort them. And it's not unusual for an applicant to have a mix of different recommenders. With undergrad recommenders, I think there is some general preference for faculty recommenders, but that doesn't mean you're supposed to have all faculty. It could be if you're sending two, it could be 1 and 1, it could be 2 and 1. But one of the first questions, and usually the first question I ask is, who's going to write the best letters? One of the first questions applicant will ask me is, I've got these recommenders, but I have the CEO of this company, or I have the head of or the chair of the department. These are the people I should go to, right? And they say no. I said, what are they going to say? We've seen letters from a lot of high-ranking people, because people will say, oh, here's a letter I got 5 years ago from this person. I saw letters from Bill Gates and Bill Clinton, for instance. I haven't seen them all, but I've seen a couple from them. And the letters that I saw said, Jane Doe is really good. Her father worked for me, and I know she's going to be just, and like a paragraph, I'm like, please don't send this. Do not include this. Quality first, and then we can do the sorting and see if there's what the mix is going to be from there.
You got more to say on that?
Yeah, I think I was going to say, my question is always, who knows you best? And it's not the title. Now, when I say that, this is important, it's not who knows you best as in your clergy or, the aunt who is a judge, because they know, and that letter pretty much goes, yep, into this pile, because it's not helpful. So it needs to be somebody who's worked with you academically, professionally, and who can talk to those traits of yours, not, how wonderful and perfect you are, because I'm your aunt, which isn't going to go over too well.
So yeah, the sort of rule of thumb that I like to tell my students is, make sure the person can tell a personal story about you, but make sure that personal story they tell about you is about the great work that you have done,
right.
And not how they're connected to you or who you are as a person.
Yep.
Cool. So then we got GPA, we got LSAT, we got letters of rec, which actually I would put lower than personal statement.
Mm-hmm.
Do you all agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So give me the short. I know each of you I have heard talk extensively about the personal statement. Give me the short version. What are we trying to accomplish with a personal statement?
All right. I always start with my clients when I say, that interview question that we all really just dread, where they go, tell me about yourself. That's kind of the personal statement. Tell me about yourself in 2 pages, And so what's important is to really focus, and you want to demonstrate. You don't want to say, I'm a great person, I love law. How do you love law? What have you done? What are some, back to the stories. Tell me a story about something that you've done. And then hopefully talk about why that story matters, how it got you to where you are, and ideally leading to, and now here we are, I'm applying to law school and this is why. That's my quick version. Jesse.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Then the rule that we've talked about for years is show, don't tell. Don't tell them that you're good at this, I'm good at that. Just like when the recommender is writing a letter, we don't want them to just say, oh, he or she's good at this and that. Tell a story that shows you're really great at something. And don't worry, if it's not like law related, very few of the great statements are law related until they get to the end and talk a little bit about law school and why the applicant wants to go. It could be about almost anything you could think of. It could be about your athletics, something you've done in music, you name it. It could be something deeply personal. I've just seen such an amazing array. We've seen such an amazing array of stories over the years, and it's what makes one of the things that really I think makes this so exciting for people like me and Barb, that we get to see a story told every day that's just unique about, and that's what they want to see, unique. What makes this applicant unique and special? And what do we feel they'll contribute because of that? And it's just, it can be an amazing story. And typically it's we're talking about it as if it's easy, and it's not easy. Applicants pull their hair out. We help them to pull their hair out, but then hopefully piece it back in so it looks better than it would look. But in the end, it's a worthwhile process. And I could see applicants years from now in a number of cases showing their statements to their children and saying, look what I did years back. And their children saying, wow, I'm really proud of you.
I think I would just also,
that. Oh, go ahead, Barb. Excuse me.
No, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, I think what's so great about everyone who's listening is that they have time. And this personal statement takes more time. I have lots of clients who start off with, I'm a great writer, but you're writing about yourself. And that's not something that we're trained to do in school. And so it's hard. It's a hard thing to look into yourself, to think about these things. Why am I doing this? So know that it's going to take more than that paper that you wrote for that class that you got out that night. It's not a one and done. Hopefully it's not a one and done. That's usually what happens with those that Jesse talked about, where we go, let's work on this. So,
right.
Sorry about.
No. I think that's absolutely right. It needs a lot of work and rewriting. And if you keep anything from your first draft, you've probably done very well, right? It needs to be personal, and that's hard. But doing a good job of that can make a big difference on your application. And I want to be clear, right? For folks that are thinking about applying for fall 2022, you got a lot of time. Great start. For folks that are thinking about applying for fall 2021, you don't have a lot of time. Great, start, right? Start brainstorming tonight. And speaking of tonight, tomorrow is the deadline to register for the April LSAT. If you have not yet done so and you were thinking you take that test, make sure you do, right? Because we really, for folks that are trying to apply this year, we're up against it and we're late in the cycle for that. Now, we could talk a lot more about any one of these topics. I know that we could, but I do want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about where we are currently in the timeline, as I was just alluding to. So, Jesse, why don't you start? Walk me through, if I'm applying for the fall of this year, how do I make sure that I have my ducks in a row? Where are we in the cycle, and how will that affect my chances of getting in at this point?
Yeah. So we're very late in the cycle right now for this particular consulting season. Law schools admit students on a rolling basis as they review the applications, roughly in the order in which they come in, and they start admitting applicants. Almost all the law schools, but a very small number, started admitting applicants months and months and months ago. And the problem about applying now or next month or the month after that, even though you may see a deadline, August 1st, 2021, think, oh, I've got plenty of time. The problem is by the time they get your application, let's say you submit it next week, let's say March 1st, you submit it. By the time they get it and thoroughly review it, because they've still got a lot of applications coming in, a lot, and probably most, and maybe the vast majority of the seats may be filled or on their way to being filled at a particular law school. Now, if you were applying at this time, in the year, a couple of years ago, 3, 4, 5, last 10 years, it's actually been not a terrible thing, not a rough thing. Not great, not great. Your chances definitely have gone down, but this year applications are just up so much. I believe there's been a 20 to 21% increase in the number of applicants and over a 30% increase in the number of applications that have been filed. And a lot of those were front loaded because, as folks know from the past year, the US hit, with the rest of the world, hit some tough economic times. And when we hit tough economic times in the US, applications, and generally grad school applications, go through the roof. It happened in the early 2000s, happened in the early part of the Great Recession, and we're seeing it now. And so, for that reason, because it's more competitive this year, applying at this time in the year is not great. Your odds are going to be weighed down just because of the timing. It doesn't mean you won't get in. You could still get in, especially if you have the kind of LSAT score which will turn their head at this point. And so, that could make a big difference, something that really catches their eye right away. Let's also not forget, it's late in the season. They've been reading a lot more applications than they used to reading. They're human. They're getting tired of reading applications. They read more applications in a given year than people like me and Barb do. We get a select group of applicants and work with. They're reading hundreds, in some cases well over that number of applications in a given year. And so they're not as fresh. They don't have time. They might not be as friendly as they were earlier in the year. Plus, they already know this is a very competitive year, so they're going to be looking at the applications with a more discerning eye. So for this year, at least, it's tougher to apply at this time of the year than it was in prior years. Having said that, though, if you apply this year and you don't get in, let's say you apply March 1st and you get rejected to all your schools. Law schools have a tendency to not hold a prior rejection against you, unlike, let's say, medical school. And so for that reason, I'll advise a lot of applicants, don't do it. Just wait till the fall, send in the application fresh. There's a little advantage to early season, disadvantage to late season. And they'll say, well, will it hurt? And I'll say, they're not going to hold it against you. And most of my clients will say, okay, let's go for it now. And I'll say, all right, let's go for it. I'm all in.
Barb, similarly, not only are we seeing a lot more applications, but it seems like, at least anecdotally, LSAT scores have improved this cycle based on the fact that we have the flex test, right, which is a shorter 3-section test rather than a 5-section traditional LSAT. And so that also has a dramatic impact on applicants, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's gonna, and we don't know the trend yet because it's still too new, but hopefully that means that it's gone up a little bit for everybody, but it is going to make those numbers, and that, I have this and this number, it's going to make it harder. It's going to make it more competitive. The admissions reps have piles and piles this year. So you really do need to study for the LSAT, and do not, I cannot tell you, and Jed is the LSAT person, but how many clients I've had who have said, I thought I was going to get this, and I always ask, did you take it timed? No, and so that's the piece. Like, for those of you who are applying for 2022, you have so much time, and it's so great. And it's like it really is what I tell people. It's the ideal situation. Focus on the LSAT, your school, and then take that LSAT, and then you have time to focus on the other pieces.
So advice to folks that are applying for fall of this year: get it done. If you're serious about doing it, do it, because we're up against it. Yeah. Let's switch to talking to the majority of folks here who are thinking further ahead, right? Yeah. So what's the ideal timeline like? If I'm a student trying to make sure that I've got all my ducks in a row, what do I do?
So I would say the ideal, and this, I'm kind of talking to that person who's going into their senior year, finishing up their junior year. Again, LSAT, that's what your goal is from here until my ideal timeline, June. Take it in June, take it in that timeline. And then spend the summer working on your statement. and spend the time building up your resume, getting that ready so that when you go back to school, you're not just doing the LSAT. You're not just doing your law school applications, you're doing your school and whatever else it is, because hopefully, fingers crossed, we will all be in school, which, we haven't been. So that's a piece to look at, spend this summer working on all of those pieces, getting your letters of rec if you can find your professors. And then ideally aim for the beginning of November to get those applications in. If that is, we used to say Thanksgiving, right, Jesse? It always was, and it still is. I would still say Thanksgiving is I want it done by. But as we see these numbers going up, as we see it becoming a little harder, I'm going to push people for the ideal. Aim for November 1st, get them off, and then be done and be able to kind of focus on the rest of it.
Right. And for applicants applying in 2022, I really like, whether they're applying in 2021 or 22, taking the LSAT when you're not, if you can take it when you're not in class, that's a lot better. You won't have that conflict of, it might bring my grades down if I study too much or this, or I won't do as well in the LSAT because I got this really tough course this semester. So I really like that idea of really, just sort of scheduling everything in an appropriate way. But another thing I want to bring up, especially about the 2022 applicants, is the fact that they potentially have a lot more, especially, well, whether or not they're traditional or non-traditional, whether they're still in school now or they've been working for a few years, they have more control over who their recommenders are going to be and getting good recommenders than they would otherwise have if they were applying this year. And so to give you an example, and in my case, early on, my first semester, I decided I was going to do really great and go to grad school. And right away, I set my sights on Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. And my mother reminded me, she said, Jesse, I know some, you're going to get in somehow. But she said, which was at the time I had just gotten a B plus or a B minus C plus on my first midterm. I said, don't worry, I got it. She said, look, I believe you're going to get in somehow, but we don't have any money to go to graduate school. And she'd been telling me about graduate school since I was at my elementary school graduation. I said, yeah, I know. Fortunately, I knew that, so it didn't add any additional pressure. But I literally, from the first year, I calendared out everything. I strategically targeted my recommenders. And I looked for, folks who didn't give A's, and I said, I'm going to get an A in that person's course, and I'm going to get their best letter ever. Now, even they're not in their freshman year if they're applying in 2022, but they've got some time to really think about who their recommenders are going to be. And they may say, look, I want to take 2 courses with this professor because that professor will get to know me better. Or if they're at work, they've been out of school for a while, they may say, I don't want to drop this on my recommender at the last minute. And they've been a little irritated with me lately, and I need to sort of get on their good side. If they've slacked off at work or whatever the case may be, they really need to step on it over the coming year and really begin to prep their writers for success and target their writers. And so I really, I know that Barb said I'm a control freak. My old college roommates, who's a medical doctor, he said, if you ever have to have surgery, I'm not going to do it because you'll be telling me what to do. And so I want you to not only control everything you can as an applicant, but down to the tiniest little particle that you can control. So I want you to pick your recommenders early, or potential recommenders early, and really groom them all the way through. I've had students do that to me, and they ended up with great letters. I'm like, wow, they're feeding me all this great information. And this is without really brown nosing. They were like, when we had discussions, there would be intellectual things, and it was really a great way to do it. When during the summer, they would say, I've got this great internship, here's what I'm doing. So of course, when it comes time for me to write their letter, it's like, oh, I know so much about them, and they're spectacular in every way. So groom your recommenders, prepare for your LSAT, or for those applying in 2022 in particular, and you can really move your GPA higher because you have some time at this point. You've got this semester. If you're taking summer courses, you've got summer. If you're taking, certainly you'll be taking fall courses, you've got fall. Then you got the year after this. So you've got time. If your GPA is not great right now, for those applying in 2022, you have time to turn it around and push that all the way through. So you have a lot more control than maybe a lot of you think you do.
See why you want Jesse on your side? Jesse will make sure you get all the things. I'm so glad that both of you emphasize one, letters of rec, which folks should start thinking about early, but then also LSAT. And I think that this takes on a heightened consideration, not only given that we've seen that the cycle has become more competitive, but also given that June is going to be the last 3-section LSAT that we know of. June of this year is the last in the flex, 3 sections in a row, no experimental section. Starting in August of this year, they are reintroducing an experimental section. It will be unmarked, it will be unscored, but it does extend the length of your test. And for most test takers, that's going to be harder, right? Because you're going to have to stay focused for longer, and it's just tougher. So if you've got bandwidth right now, students, to take the LSAT now, prepare for the June test, you should, because the June test will be the last 3-section LSAT that we know of for at least the next 2 or 3 years. That's what they've committed to for the new 4-section test starting in August. So that said, the best time to take the LSAT is when you are ready to get the score that you need, right? That the timeline doesn't matter if you ain't ready yet. So this is why start by taking a practice test, and we got a free one. I'll shoot you a link at the end of the session so that you can go sign up for it and take our free practice test. See where you're starting from, and then you do a little research in terms of the schools that you're interested in. What kind of score do you need based on where your GPA is or where you expect it to be, so that you will be a competitive applicant? Because those really are the 2 biggest, most important pieces of your application. And I'll link that tool as well at the end of the session, the LSAC's school research tool. So that you guys can do that research as well. And that's work. I was just talking to Jesse last week about that. And Jesse was telling me 20 hours, right? You need to spend a significant amount of time doing your research.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what Barbara's going to say about this, but when applicants are preparing their applications, ideally I want them to know about the schools. And not only that, when a school doesn't have an essay question on the application that says why you're applying to this school, I have them put a few sentences into the actual application toward the end, and just being very specific about features that really attract them. And they'll come in and they'll, first draft will sometimes be, oh, the faculty are so great. The school's like #1, and the students are so nice and friendly. And I'm like, don't say any of this, because it sounds like you didn't even look at the school. Go back, look at the law school clinics, look at internships opportunities, look at the student organizations, look at maybe there's a law school journal you want to write for, maybe there's a certain learning track at the school, maybe there's a good student faculty ratio, or it's in a great location for you, whether it's a city or a rural area, suburban area. Be specific, and don't write a lot about it in the statement, but if you could just give them an idea that it says, hey, I actually researched your school a little, and there's some things I connect with and that are specific to me. And that takes them a number of hours, and they get frustrated and like, do I have to do this? I'm like, you don't have to do it. But when I talk to admissions officers and they say, and I ask them questions about this, and they say, well, it's funny, we don't often get students being specific about our programs. And they say, and in fact, a lot of the time we get them mentioning the wrong school name. And so, you really want to know a program, intimately when you're applying it to, and definitely make sure you get the school names correct.
My ex-wife get into her schools, and one of the sort of, I consider it the coup de grace for all of those, why this school, I always worked in the school's motto into that essay. She got into every school she applied to. Right. Do your research, y'all. It matters. It matters. All right. So we're just over halfway. Can you believe it? We feel like we've barely even scratched the surface. Let's actually do a quick recap. A quick recap of where we've been. So the first major pieces of the application, order of importance. Things 1 and 2 are what?
LSAT GPA.
LSAT GPA.
Yep.
LSAT GPA. Okay.
That's it.
thing one. And then tier two, we've got which things?
Personal statement, for sure.
Tell a story.
Tell a story and hopefully explain why you're applying to law school
Okay.
in that statement. Yep.
Anything else in tier two? You think personal statement by itself down there?
I would say to me, that's the biggest. And then maybe like a step down from that would be the letters of recommendation, your resume, depending on your stage in life and what you've got on that resume. But that doesn't just mean jobs. That could be volunteer. It could be organizations. You might have had a leadership position. You might have been a resident assistant, all of those things.
Right. So I realized we haven't talked at resume at all.
We haven't.
Help me. What
We'll get
do I
back
need
there.
to know about setting up my law school resume?
I always say use the same resume. The only thing is that I have a lot of students who are business students. It has to be one page. And it really doesn't for law school. Can it be 5 pages? No, but it can be 2 pages. So I always tell people that I'm working with, I want to see more. And it's my job to say, you don't need that babysitting job you had back in high school. We can take that off. But if I never knew it existed, then I don't know. So it's always better to show more in the beginning. Your resume can be 2 pages, but don't make it 2 pages if you're adding babysitting jobs. But it is important, and it shows a level of professionalism, I think, to show that you've built a resume.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Oh, Jesse, is it right that the farther you are from your undergraduate experience, right, the more life experience you're expected to have. So the more you should have on your resume. Yes.
Yeah, I think, generally speaking, that's true. And the only times I might break the 2-page rule is when I'm working with, somebody who's incredibly experienced, someone at an executive level where they might need more than 2 pages. Usually, even with some of them, I'll try to get it to 2. But there are a number of cases where we work with applicants, not just in college, but who've been out of school for 20, 30, and I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience now, 20, 30, or even more years. I mean, we get folks of all ages applying to law schools, whether full-time and part-time, and that can affect length. Although, to go back to Barb's point, 2 pages is the rule of thumb. But as you pointed out, Jed, to start out tonight's session, there are exceptions to every rule, and so we have to sort of play it by ear.
Good. So GPA, LSAT, personal statement, letters of rec, resume, and addenda.
Yeah. And again, each case will vary. So somebody may have done something, everything may be great, but they may have done for an addenda, which I guess we should introduce that a little bit. An addendum is really something that you include. It's an extra sheet, an extra upload to the application that usually explains something that will put you in a bad light. It could be GPA related issues. GPA is not good. LSAT related issues. LSAT's not good, or you're trying to explain the difference between your 146 LSAT and your 155 LSAT, and but this is why, this is what happened. Or it could be something else. It could be a DUI. We have, a lot of applicants with different types of situations, and in certain cases, it can be serious enough where if the addenda is not good, it can be a real issue. And by the way, the DUI explanation is also in a character and fitness section of the applicants and others. But it's still an addenda for that, so it still counts as an addendum. But sometimes some of those, what an applicant has done or not done, that can reflect badly on them, that could be enough to harm their chances, or maybe ensure that they won't get in at all without a strong explanation. So sometimes the addendum, you wouldn't think it's going to be that important, but sometimes it could be more important than we even thought it was going to be.
And I would just add to the addendum, it is a factual short paragraph. It is not, I learned so much from this. It is simply, junior year of, I caught mono and I was down and out and I could not, or I have a feeling now, and I haven't seen this yet, but I'm expecting some COVID explanations of GPAs that just virtual learning wasn't easy. And so I think that's where an addendum is great. And it gives you a chance to factually, succinctly explain And like Jesse said, or an LSAT. And, you know, I had a student who took it, and there was literally, they were in the city and there was construction, and it was.
Oh no, I think Barb, we've lost your audio.
Well, just to build on, one additional case. Barb was talking case of mono. You didn't do well in your courses. You don't have to say you learned anything. I want to give you a little bit different example. Let's say you were an applicant who cheated on an exam in his or her first year in college. Had those cases. And that case is still going to be relatively short, might be a paragraph or two, or maybe a little longer, but usually a paragraph is good enough, paragraph or two. That case, you want to make sure that the person has learned something, because if they're saying they really did something wrong and they haven't learned a lesson, that's a problem, which is different from the typical LSAT or GPA explanation.
Sure. And Jesse, I realize there's a piece that is important that we haven't talked about. I would still put it among the tier 3, but a diversity statement. We haven't even mentioned the diversity statement.
Yeah. The diversity essay has been around for a long time. It's usually about a page, double spaced. And in many cases, you're limited to a page, double spaced. And in this essay, the school simply wants to know how you're going to enhance diversity when you get to, whether it's in law school or in your career. And this essay has been around for a long time. I wrote one back when I applied. And for many years, people would say, I am ABCD, therefore I will bring diversity, whether it had to do, it was underrepresentation in terms of maybe they were poor, maybe they were a certain ethnic or racial background or certain religious background. So they would say, I'm this, therefore I bring XYZ. And here's my experiences, and that's why I bring XYZ. And when I started, working with applicants as an admissions consultant, I said, this is good, but I want you to do better than the other person from the same background, because you're working with me. And it's my job and my ambition to ensure that you do better than the other applicant in your same situation who's writing this diversity essay on a similar or the same topic. And so I don't just want you to say, I'm this, therefore I'll bring diversity. I want you to say how you're going to enhance diversity. So I'll say, okay, you're this, but what if the reviewer says, okay, we've got a number of applicants who are this. What makes you bring more diversity than that person? And it could be something you've learned from your experiences. Maybe you've learned how to treat people in a different way. Maybe you've learned how to understand people in a different way. It could be so many ways that you approach the diversity essay. Also, the diversity essay might not be so much about who you are, but some sort of very special background quality that you have. Such as, let's say you're an engineer. You've been an engineer professionally for a number of years, and you want to go into intellectual property law. Most law school applicants aren't really sure what they want to go into, but let's say you do know. And in this case, you're an engineer, you want to go into intellectual property law. You could be a great asset, depending on your level of skill, to not just your fellow students who are interested in that area or interested even in some of the coursework that relates to that law, but to your future employers, because you're coming in and you're able to not just understand the law in the cases, but maybe even some of the technology involved in those cases. So that person might bring diversity in a way that's a little different. And so when we think about the diversity essay, I really try to impress on all applicants that consider how they might bring diversity, because we want to make sure that there's, if you're a rural applicant, you can bring diversity potentially. If you grew up or worked on a farm, you could potentially bring diversity in some way. There are so many ways in which you can bring don't think of it narrowly and only terms, which are important, but in only terms of a religion, a race, ethnicity, whether you've been poor. You can bring diversity in other ways.
Okay. The other thing that I want to throw out there is a lot of schools actually ask for school specific, and they'll say they're optional. And I'll say, if you can answer it, it is not optional. Are there optional essays? Absolutely. The diversity essay is optional. Right. And I tell students, don't force it. If it's not right, it's not right. Mm-hmm. But if it says, why are you interested in UCSD? And you don't answer it, you've answered it without answering it. So the plus side of all of those extra essays is that they're usually very specific. You're answering a question, not this big general, tell us about yourself. And so it's a shorter essay. I tell people to save those, get the main personal statement done, but realize that that's a huge check mark once the big personal one, and then the diversity. We still may have some more essays to write. But those are important, and they're optional, but they're really not. Yeah.
Right.
Optional. Do you want to go there?
Yes.
Right.
That's a great point because yeah, and I'll have to tell that to some folks when they're writing the diversity essay. I said, I don't think this is working.
Right.
But when it's a why this school essay, and you can't explain why you want to go, and it's optional, and you haven't written why this school, one potential factor in an admissions officer's decision is whether the student's going to accept their offer. Because they want to show a high yield. They'd rather, they don't want to make offers to people who won't accept. And if you've taken the time to research the school and show them how you really connect in that optional why this school essay, that's a big plus for you versus the applicant with the same numbers, the same type of background as you who didn't do it. That's a big plus. So Barb's point, I mean, people really have to listen closely. If it's a why this school essay, you really need to research why this school and write a good essay there. If it's a diversity essay, it may fit you. I want you to think about it, but don't give them BS in the diversity essay because, that could do more harm than good.
Okay. So again, finishing our recap here, timeline, applying for fall of this year.
Timeline and applying for fall of this year, ideally, Barb and I would like to see applicants, ideally, with the LSAT done by the time the fall hits. And then as Barb pointed out, Thanksgiving has always been considered an early
No. Fall 2021.
Yes. Yeah. So for fall 2021.
No, for going in fall 20. You mean those who are
pretending
applying
this
right
year.
now? Yeah.
No, pretend. Yeah, for this year, we'd want that LSAT done before the fall of this year.
We would need that LSAT done almost immediately, right?
LSAT's done, Jesse. People who are going to be going to school in the fall.
Right. So we got to get that LSAT done immediatamente if it's not already.
Yes.
And then we got to get the rest of those pieces just in as we can, right? Because we really are almost out of time.
We are,
And based on the cycle, we should be realistic about our chances too, right?
Absolutely right.
And I do want to throw out one more thing for those who have already applied but are listening and are on the wait list. That's another one where when Jesse talked about writing that letter to that school to say, thank you for considering me. Here are the very specific reasons. And now you go even further into depth about why you want to go there, why it is your first choice, why if you get accepted, you will go. And that's that for those who are hoping to be in school in September, maybe have applied, but are starting to hear back, but it's waitlist. You're not done. You can still make a difference. You can still tell them, don't send them an email every day. But if something changes, let them know. Let them know that you got that new internship. Let them know that you got the summer job working in the law firm or wherever. But also talk about specifically, this is why I want to go to GW.
Okay. And so then for folks who are thinking fall 2022, now we're talking letters of rec right now. Think about who your recommenders are, start going to office hours and start studying for the LSAT so that we can get the LSAT done June, if not June, August.
Right.
Okay. While we're talking about it, what about early decision?
So you want to go first, Jesse?
You can take it, Barb.
So I think there's early decision and there's early, but binding, non-binding. And that's the big piece. So unless it is your absolute, no matter what, even if that other school gives you 100% merit scholarship, then binding is okay. I really work with people very carefully to say, before we go binding, we need to know what that means. And it means you have committed to that school. For the schools that are just early decision and get it in early, it's great. I don't know if it gives people as much of an advantage as I think they would like to hope it does, but it certainly does not hurt. And it means that it's done early. To me, that's the best piece, is whether you need that mental early decision deadline, November 1st, get it in, then it's in, whether it's early decision, So I think, to me, that's the big kind of, like Jesse talks about, that control freak. If I know my schedule says it's due November 1st, it's due November 1st. So that to me is the great piece of it.
So Jesse's nodding.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. In regard to that, we don't get many folks who go ahead with the binding early decision because of the reasons that Barb pointed out, which is if the school makes an offer, you have to not go anywhere else, even if you don't end up going to that school. You're not going. You're committing to not going to law school if you don't take their offer for that year at least. And so a small proportion of applicants do binding, but if you really want to go to a school, 100%, no matter what your funding offers are at other places, then binding makes a lot of sense. And it can potentially, if you have the right number, if you're a competitive applicant, you can get a little bit more advantage than you would had you not done the binding in that case. But schools usually will never say it'll be a significant advantage. They'll say you might get a slight, more of a look at that point.
Well, and my thinking on that has always been it's super location based, right? That if you know, right, that you have a family, you are going to be in this city, and it's either you're in this city or you're not going to law school, and there's one law school in the city, sure, apply early decision, right? But otherwise, in most cases, it doesn't make very much sense.
Right.
All right. Then I saw we have a couple juniors or underclassmen here, and they're wondering what they can do. Here's what you can do: take a formal logic class, and then your spring of your junior year, I want you to take the lightest course schedule you can, so that we can spend a couple months studying for the LSAT, and it won't hurt your GPA. And if it won't hurt you if you can, convince some lawyer to give you an office job or an internship, or see what lawyers actually do. But those are the things. Take a formal logic class, and then take a really light load your spring semester, your junior year, so that you can prepare for that LSAT. All right. Gracious, we covered a lot of ground. We only have a few minutes left. What other last minute piece of advice? Anything that we should say about those trends that we are seeing in terms of number of applications, in terms of the scores? What do applicants really need to know?
They need to brace themselves because it's been so competitive this year. They need to go in being conservative and feeling like, okay, it might be that competitive again. And for those reasons, be ahead of the game, dot every I, cross every T. I would be saying this anyway, but it's really, really important now because there are, some applicants who I've seen this year who would have gotten in to certain schools at any application in the last 10 years to some of the law schools they applied to, and they got waitlisted to schools in some cases where I'd never seen an applicant as good as applicant X getting waitlisted to this school. And I mean, it can only be one thing, that at certain schools or at a number of schools, it's just become a lot more competitive. So applicants need to be more ahead of the game this year than they usually are, this coming season than they usually are, just to play it safe, because we don't know if the numbers are going to stay where they are, or if they're going to go down a little, or if they're going to go down a lot. So they really need to plan for a competitive year to be in the best position they can be in.
Well, and
I would say also that I think COVID has made it tough to even visit schools to figure out where you want to go. And so I think that whole concept of coming up with a list. So a list matters in terms of your LSAT and your GPA, but it also matters, where do you want to go? And I always say that there's two types of people applying to law school. One who says, I don't care what law school I want to go to in the fall, I want to be in law school. The other one says, I want to go to law school, but only this level. And honestly, both are fine. You just have to know what's important to you. And so if you know that you're not going to a certain tier school, don't apply. Don't spend the $80, $100. It's not, if you're not going to go. So I think it's going to be harder for students to find what school works for them when you can't visit. Now, the plus side is there's a whole lot more online than there has ever been available. You have virtual tours, you have virtual meetings, you can talk to people. Use those advantages, take that time over the summer to really start exploring and thinking to yourself, where do I want to be? Location is big. It's an important piece of this puzzle. So I think that's the other piece, is to really think about that list and starting to figure out where you want to be.
And while it's true that applicants should be prepared for the next cycle to be very competitive, if 2020 taught us anything, it's expect the unexpected. Who knows? Who knows what it'll be like, right? So make sure that you are as best prepared as you can for the opportunities that come. Worst case, you're going to get some scholarship offers that you wouldn't otherwise, right? Like, oh, terrible. But I also I see some folks that are feeling nervous now. Remember that if you get rejected once, they don't hold that against you. It right, that you're planning to be a lawyer for decades. If we have to delay a year, let's find something interesting to do with this year. You know, we'll take a gap year. We'll boost our LSAT score. We'll rewrite our essays, and then we'll come back applying as a stronger applicant. So don't get discouraged, y'all. Remember that this is a long-term goal with long-term rewards. It's not the end of the world if it doesn't happen this year. It's just unusual that we're talking about this in the law school world, whereas in, like, say, the med school world, that's just right. Everybody's just like, yeah, I might not get in this year. And so it's a different conversation. But LSAT, folks that are wanting to apply for fall of 2022, get that LSAT done. Remember, June is the last time that you will be able to take a 3-section LSAT that we know of. It is an advantage to get registered. Registration just opened up yesterday for that June test. We start by taking a practice test, see where you are, and then we can based on that, we can build you a study plan to make sure you get to where you need to be, whether that's, you know, tutoring or taking a course or signing up for one of my boot camps. I got a boot camp starting on March 8th. We'd love to see you in. Right? There's lots of ways to prepare for the LSAT. See what you need to do first. Take that practice test. See where you're starting from. All right, time for us to wrap up. Single best piece of advice, single biggest thing that folks need to be thinking about as they approach their applications. Barb, would you start us off? Where should people be?
Right. Single best. It is very manageable.
Oh no, Barb's giving her best advice and I can't hear it. All right, Jesse, we're going to throw it to you.
Yep.
Jesse,
as Barbara was saying, it is a very manageable process. You take it one piece at a time. We help applicants get through it all the time. And the other piece, and Jed mentioned folks were a little nervous about what lies in front of them. Don't be nervous. If you want to go to law school, and I've had applicants work with me over a period of 2, 3, even 4 years for one reason or another. They couldn't get an LSAT score, or they had something just major that was blocking them. And if you want to get into law school, you can keep. I mean, I've literally seen applicants who are like, "I'm not going to do it." I say, stick with it. Come back next year. Let's do it again, or come back in 2 years. And so this is something that is definitely doable if it's something that you really want to do. So don't say, "Oh, don't be nervous about it now." Just get right in it. Just go for it. When you're ready. I don't want to push you ahead of when you're ready, but if you're ready, go for it. And if you really want it, don't give up.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. Y'all, it's not too late. It's not too late to get help on your application, even if you're applying for fall of this year. Jesse and Barb can do work for you still. I'm putting a link in the chat, and you're going to be able to get personal statement help from them or whatever you need. If you want to talk one-to-one, we can make that happen. And we'll polish that essay. We'll polish that application as best we can to get you ready. But you know, this is the culmination of years worth of work, and we'll just keep on pushing until we get you to where you need to be. Thank you both so much for sharing your time. I know you guys are awful busy. You're in the midst of it right now. But thank you both,
Thank
Jesse
you.
and Barb, for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thanks.